Folks, we're going to get started. If you could grab your seats, please. Councilman Burnett, I understand you have a panel of folks. If you could grab them and have them take all the seats up on the lower number half.
All right.
I know there's 7 folks slated to testify that Councilman Burnett's coordinated with in advance. If you all could each take a seat on the on your right or our left of the room. Green light. All right. Okay, this is Baltimore City Council Judiciary and Legislative Investigations Committee. City Council Bill is 18-0229, Charter Amendment, Fair Election Fund. I'm joined to my left, Vice Chair of the committee, Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark from the 14th District, Councilman Chris Burnett, Chief Sponsor of the legislation, Councilman Brandon Scott, 2nd District, member of the committee, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District. To my right, City Council President Bernard C. Jack Young, Councilman Ed Reisinger, 10th District, member of the committee, Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee. We are also joined by Kara Kuntz, Legislative Director for Council President Young, as well as Council President Young's Chief of Staff, Carolyn Moselle, Deputy Chief of Staff, Lester Davis, Director of Economic Development, Michael Huber, as well as Rebecca Tabb, who is the independent attorney for the City Council. To my immediate right is Matt Peters, staff to the committee, and we have Poetry Deal, Karen Stokes, and Karan Banks representing Mayor Catherine Pugh. We've also been joined by Councilman John Bullock from the 9th District, member of the committee. Couple quick housekeeping items. This hearing is being televised, as are all the charter amendments on Comcast Channel 25, as well as being streamed live on charmtv.tv. If you are testifying, please go up to the podium and speak clearly into the mic like this. Otherwise, they cannot hear you on TV at home. And because of the importance of a charter amendment, we want to make sure people that could not join us tonight that are at home watching can hear exactly what it is that you're saying. If you have a cell phone, please turn your cell phone to vibrate, silent, off, or some other setting that does not make noise, please. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Councilman Chris Burnett, Chief Sponsor of the legislation, for brief introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, my colleagues, Mr. President, members of the public, and our esteemed city agencies. Thank you all for coming today. I think this is a very important piece of legislation that can really have an impact on the city of Baltimore moving forward, especially in the midst of election time right now. And for those who are voting, if you have not voted early, please do so. You have until tomorrow at 8 o'clock. But the Fair Election Fund is a piece of legislation that I've been very passionate about and have been thankful of the folks who've helped push to this point today. We have a coalition of folks that I do want to take some time to acknowledge and thank for their hard work. We have Maryland PIRG, Common Cause, Progressive Maryland, Bridge, Maryland Working Families, League of Women Voters, Clean Water Action, Represent Maryland, Every Voice, Jews United for Justice. We also have SEIU Local 500, Maryland NAACP, Sierra Club, Food and Water Watch, Maryland ACLU, Interfaith Power and Light, League of Women Conservation Voters, Communities United, Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition, No Boundaries Coalition, Progressive Maryland, Chesapeake Climate Action Network, Demos, Every Voice, Common Cause, Reverend Brian Mary from BUILD, who's here today and is going to speak, as well as Hassan Giordano, who's been one of the folks helping me craft the bill. I'm thankful for this wide support on this important piece that will create a mechanism for folks who want to run for office, and money may be the challenge. As we know, all of us here today have spent a tremendous amount of time and effort to get in these positions, and we all know firsthand that it is very expensive to run for office. Between the yard signs, the t-shirts, the websites, everything that goes into it is incredibly expensive, and we need to ensure that the path to elected office, that money isn't the biggest barrier for you, and that we are investing from the city and from the public, which we already do anyway, right? We're already paying for polls, we're already paying paying for the machines and everything that goes into the operation. Yep, the judges. And so this gives yet another vehicle for the public to have much more input and a platform to get strong electeds, both in City Hall and Annapolis, and hopefully we can get this done nationwide. But it's a big deal, and I'll stop there, Mr. Chair. I know we're tight on schedule, but I think it's a huge issue that we can really make an impact on in the City of Baltimore. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Before we begin, I have a letter dated June 20th, 2018 from Congressman John Sarbanes from the 3rd District of Maryland, which I'd like to read. I know the Congressman couldn't be here today. Chairman Costello, as the Baltimore City Council considers amending the Baltimore City Charter to create and study a fair election fund, Council Bill 18-0229, I write to applaud your committee's efforts and offer my encouragement for a favorable reporting of the bill. The Fair Election Fund, envisioned by 18-0229, presents Baltimore with an opportunity to join a growing national movement to reform our politics. In state and local governments across the nation, reformers are advancing innovative citizen-owned proposals to give everyday citizens and the candidates they support the tools and resources they need to run for and win elected office. In our own state of Maryland, reformers in both Montgomery County and Howard County have implemented such systems to give power back to regular citizens. Now Baltimore has an opportunity to consider how such a system could work for its citizens. I commend the measured approach Council Bill 18-0229 has proposed, providing ample time and consideration to ensure that a reformed campaign finance system will be successful. With careful crafting, a new system can strengthen the voice of Baltimore residents and inspire broader engagement in our democratic process. In America, the size of a person's wallet should not determine the power of his or her voice. Council Bill 18-0229 takes an important first step in codifying that fundamental democratic principle for the benefit of Baltimore's citizen. Sincerely, John Sarbanes, Member of Congress. We have so folks, for those of you who haven't been here to testify in City Hall before, what we do is we'll go to the agency reports. We'll ask questions of agency officials. That'll be open to council members only. And then we will go to folks slated to testify. And then we will go to additional members of the public. First off, we have the Department of Finance. Yeah, you guys can sit at your desk, but I don't have a letter from the Department of Finance.
No letter? Yeah, we did submit a report.
Okay. Do you want to, are you guys in support, opposition?
No. Do you need me to read my report or my prepared testimony?
Why don't you have her read the report?
Yeah, why don't you read the report instead, please?
Read the report? Sure. So basically, good evening, Mr. Chairman and council members. My name is Caroline Sturgis, Deputy Budget Director with the Department of Finance. Our office has reviewed Council Bill 18-0229, and I am here to provide our position. So the bill basically has several provisions, if enacted, would have a fiscal impact to the city. The city's good financial management requires the city's leadership have flexibility to respond to needs, priorities, and most importantly, changing economic conditions. Dedicating general fund revenue for a specific purpose begins to undermine our sound financial management and puts core city services at risk. Looking forward, our 10-year forecast shows that revenue will fall short of levels needed to maintain current services. Our tax rates as is are the highest in the state. Therefore, we don't have room to raise taxes. We are facing an array of unfunded risk, such as the FMP pension litigation, police legal liabilities, additional consent decree costs, unmet capital needs across many agencies, education funding, and surplus schools. For these reasons, the Finance Department opposes Council Bill 18-0229.
Thank you. And we have a report from the Department of Law, and the Department of Law has a proposed amendment, and if that amendment is adopted, you would approve the resolution of the Mayor and City Council for form and legal sufficiency.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The text of the amendment is provided in the bill.
suggested language. By ordinance, the mayor and city council shall provide for the oversight, governance, and administration. Okay, that's the, got it, okay.
Yes.
And that's the amendment that is in front of us. Okay, understood. So if this amendment is, if this amendment's adopted, then you approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency. Got it. Okay. Go.
This is the whole amendment. I mean, that's all there is here.
Yes, Amendment 1, I believe, is what the law department wants. We'll wait until we get to the, Amendment 2.
There are other amendments that aren't the law departments. They were consolidated with other amendments.
Okay. I'm going to let the sponsor of the amendments speak to those amendments when that time comes, but I can affirm that Amendment 1 is what the law department is requesting. Okay, colleagues, are there questions for finance or law? I'll start off. Finance, can we talk about how this is going to be funded as you understand it?
Sure. So from our read of the bill, it's not dedicating a particular revenue source. So we would make the assumption that we would be looking at the general fund.
So the bill says on page 3, line 16, revenue sources, the fund established under this section may consist of 1, money appropriated to the fund in the annual ordinance of estimates, 2, grants or donations made to the fund, and 3, proceeds from fines, fees, surcharges, or other revenues dedicated to the fund by ordinance. Number 2, I assume finance has no objection with?
Right.
Grants or donations?
Correct.
Number 1, money appropriated to the fund in the annual ordinance of estimates would be a decision that BBMR would weigh heavily on in preparation of the budget.
Correct.
And then 3 would be proceeds from fines, fees, surcharges, or other revenues dedicated to the fund by ordinance. And do we have legal authority to pass ordinance to do that?
Because we're not designating a particular amount, it's not considered legislative material. So the general requirement to be exercised by ordinance is okay because we're having the city council exercise their legislative authority as opposed to trying to do that in the charter, which would be inappropriate charter material and unconstitutional.
So that would be appropriate for ordinance, but not appropriate for charter amendment.
Correct.
So, can you repeat the last part?
Sure. Since we're not, we're allowing the city council to exercise its legislative authority by requiring that it be done by ordinance in this charter amendment, instead of saying X amount of money will be dedicated for this particular purpose. That would be an unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority and improper, therefore improper charter material.
Which would be unconstitutional.
The provision, if you had a provision in there that said a specific amount was going to be dedicated to this fund.
Okay. So we could pass an ordinance, if we pass it today and it goes through all the motions and it becomes part of the charter, we could pass an ordinance that could dedicate a specific amount of funds to this, or only a specific source?
A specific source.
Specific source. Okay.
Every year.
Well, it would have to be done, yeah.
Councilman Reisinger?
For clarity, for the law department, it says revenue sources, but it states, line 17, the fund established under this section may consist. It doesn't say shall, it says may. So that's not.
Right, that's discretionary. The council is not required to do any of those things,
Yeah.
but they can by ordinance if they choose to.
Got it.
May's okay.
Colleagues, any other questions for law or finance? Councilman Dorsey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry if I'm just not understanding this. this will establish the fund, and this is saying that the council has the power by ordinance to establish a revenue stream into that fund?
Yes. Generally, currently, the council does not have that authority. There are no other charter provisions that allow for that. But you could, because it does not strip the council of its authority to exercise its power to cut items of appropriation, and it is not considered improper charter material because it's legislative in nature and it's being exercised in a legislative fashion.
Okay, so I was just asking for clarification because it says by ordinance, the mayor and city council may establish a continuing non-lapsing fund.
So in other words,
Does that
it's
mean,
not the
is
charter.
that a revenue stream or is that a place where money sits?
It's a revenue stream. It's a designation that a certain source of funds will.
And so by saying that we can establish a revenue stream to a thing, is it it's implicit, or did I just miss it elsewhere in the bill where it says there's a place where that money's going?
The details would be in the ordinance enacted pursuant to that authority.
Okay.
Did we say,
Microphone, please, Councilwoman.
did you say all this?
Microphone, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Petro, where do you say what you just said in writing in your law report?
We did not address it in our report because we determined that it was legally sufficient. So I think we just said one line in, let's see, I don't have it in front of me.
You do have one
Right,
thing.
there's one line in like the second paragraph that says, or third, the establishment of the fund has no legal impediments. Let's see, I didn't write this report, so forgive me.
Okay, let's take our time and make sure we all have this in writing.
That particular, we did not treat it in the bill because we felt it was legally sufficient, so we didn't go into detail on the legal analysis because there was no problem.
Well,
We can provide you with an explanation if you would like us to.
Mr. Chairman, could I request that you, on behalf of the committee, receive just a written statement from Mr. Petro before second reader that the issue of the ordinance was
That's
not
fine.
taken up, but is part of the legal sufficiency, wasn't taken up because it wasn't a legal problem.
It's fine, we can do
Please and
that,
thank you.
certainly. Yeah,
Would you?
certainly.
And you'll have that for the committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Colleagues, any other questions for finance or law? Okay, first up, we have Emily Scarr with Maryland PIRG.
Do I need to stand or can I do it here?
If the mic's on, you can stay right there. Actually, why don't you stand just because it's on
Better for TV to
TV?
stand.
Please and thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Emily Scarr. I'm the director of Maryland PIRG and a Baltimore resident. Maryland PIRG is a citizen-funded public interest advocacy organization with thousands of grassroots members in Maryland and across the state. Thank you, Councilman Burnett, for introducing this bill and members of the committee, and to my councilwoman, Vice Chair Mary Pat Clark. I also want to thank the community members who came out to support the bill today. Can you all stand up real quick? So our coalition is a diverse group of good government, faith, and environmental and community organizations who have united together to support a new way to fund our elections. Sorry, making this out of my face. We believe that in Baltimore's democracy, the amount of money your family makes, your race, your gender, shouldn't determine the volume of your voice in our elections. But the rise of corporate and mega donor campaign spending has forced Baltimore elected officials and candidates to be increasingly dependent on large and corporate contributions, giving them less time to hear from and serve their constituents. In the last election, for example, the cost to run for mayor increased by 25%, and the cost to run for city council increased by 50%. This increase wasn't fueled by a rise in the number of donors participating, but instead by the average size of donations. We believe that a fair elections program would be better for voters, better for candidates, and better for all of Baltimore. And this step in the process is really critical in order to actually make sure that the program has sufficient funding. You know, the Baltimore City Council needs to be able to budget for it over the course of 4 years, not all at once. And that's why actually setting up this fair election fund and charter commission to study the program is an essential first step to take into the program. It's similar to what Howard County did to establish their program last year. In these programs, once the fund is established and we'd work with you to pass the implementation language, candidates who don't accept any large or corporate contributions can be eligible to receive limited matching funds for the small donations they receive from Baltimore residents. Our analysis of the program in Montgomery County is showing that it's having promising results. As of January, small donations accounted for only 8% of candidates not participating in those programs, where those who were participating received more than 90% of their money from folks giving $150 or less, excuse me. And as you heard, we have also passed a program in Howard County. DC passed theirs in January, and our own Congressman, Representative Sarbanes, has introduced the Government by the People Act to do this at the national level. We hope today you will vote to support this charter amendment and to establish the Fair Elections Funding Commission, letting Baltimore voters weigh in and starting a thoughtful and conversation about the best design for the program that we will implement later on. Our democracy is in a fragile state, but you can make a big difference in the Baltimore community and take bold action to stand up for a stronger democracy, help increase civic participation, and reduce the role of money in our elections. Thank you so much for your time and your service to Baltimore.
Thank you, ma'am. Jennifer Lynn from Every Voice.
Thank you,
We've
committee,
also-
for the opportunity to testify today, and thank you, Councilman Burnett and committee co-sponsors for your leadership on this bill. I'm Jen Lynn. I am the National Campaigns Director for Every Voice. We're a national organization working to lift up the voices of everyday people and limit the influence of money in politics, and we do that by passing and supporting successful implementation of small donor election reform. And I want to highlight a few key points from some written testimony submitted by our Research and Policy Director, Tam Dwan. It's important to note that small donor public financing is a well-established and proven method of reducing the influence of money in politics and giving everyday constituents a bigger voice in our elections. More than 30 states and localities have some form of small donor public financing, and more jurisdictions are joining their ranks each year. The experience of these programs showed us that they can increase political equity and participation and reduce the barriers for qualified candidates to run and win elected office, including women and people of color who are more likely to be shut out of opportunities without access to wealth or wealthy donors. Studies in places where there are longstanding small donor financing programs like New York City, Connecticut, Maine show that an increase in the number of women and people of color to those offices. And candidates like Tish James, the first African-American woman elected citywide office in New York City, credit these programs for giving them the ability to win. And not only do these programs change who can run and win, but they also shift who candidates raise money from, who they talk to, and whose concerns they hear. Studies show that large donors are more white, male, and affluent than the population generally. By freeing candidates from the need to seek out big donors and making small donors more important to candidates, these programs allow politicians to fund their campaigns from, and thus be accountable to, a more representative group of people. Around the country, Americans are mobilizing to change political systems that too often fail them and concentrate power with the wealthy few. With your support, Baltimore could be at the forefront of a renewed and more equitable democracy. Thank you for your time, and again, we urge committee support for this bill.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Councilman Leon Pinkett from the 7th District, member of the committee. We're going to go into recess for a moment on this hearing. Is there a motion to reconsider the previous vote on Council Bill 18-0259, Fire Code repealing Appendix D? Yes, so he can vote. So moved. A motion by Bullock, second by Clark. All those in... He's here. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we are reopening Council Bill 18-0259, Fire Code repealing Appendix D. We have a amended bill. Is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
Move the bill as amended.
Motion by Clark. Is there a second? Second. Second by Scott, I believe. It sounded like. Bullock? Yes. Pinkett?
Yes.
Reisinger?
Yes.
Scott? Stokes? Yes. Costello, yes. Clark?
Yes.
That bill passes 7-0, moves to second reader on June 25th. We are now in recess on that hearing. We will go back to Council Bill 18-0229, Charter Amendment Fair Election Fund. I apologize, everyone. Our colleague got held up, and we wanted to make sure he had an opportunity to vote on an important matter. Okay. I've lost my place here. Reverend Brian Murray. Mind reader, you knew you were next, sir. Thank you, Reverend.
Good evening to the City Council. As you know, my name is Brian Murray. Mr. Costello, I recently moved, bought a house in the Hamden-Woodbury area of Baltimore City. So I've moved out of your neighborhood. And less than 120 days ago, my denomination assigned me to one of the anchor churches in the Morrill Park neighborhood. And so I want to thank the council for the opportunity to briefly share my thoughts on the Fair Elections Fund, Charter Amendment 18-0229. In addition, thank you to Christopher Burnett for introducing and stopping past the church to share the mechanics of this bill. Thank you to the co-sponsors, councilpersons Clark, Scott, Bullock, and Pinkett. And finally, let me say good evening to Ed Reisinger. I've been in the church for about 120 days, and Mr. Reisinger has been to the church for meetings no less than a half dozen times, connecting to the issues in Morrill Park. So my thoughts on this bill. The recent events in our country make it clear that people are rising up, and they are demanding that the electoral process return to their hands and to their voices. Big donor control of the electoral process is on a collision course with the masses that demand to be heard. And if they don't know you beyond a mailer and a TV ad, you may be inviting an uphill climb. This charter amendment reignites and encourages voter empowerment in a city that can use a little of both. The city of Baltimore will reward candidates who do the grassroots campaigning. Instead of dialing for dollars, whoever listens to the issues firsthand in the smaller, intimate gatherings will earn the grassroots donations going in the door and the grassroots citizens' support in the office. Beside the matching funding, you build a base. And if there's any indifference about that, I would invite us to check in with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Several states are doing this, and several counties in Maryland are already moving in this direction. And in my opinion, this bill should be renamed the Citizens Bill. I'm asking you to support this bill and create an even playing field where even working class donors and working class donations mean something. Because the time is coming when whoever invests in empowering the people and invests in building a base is going to be the person who wins. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend. Jay Hutchins, Working Family Party. Emily Ranson, Clean Water Action.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, and we are supporting the creation of a Fair Elections Fund. In order to enable candidates to run campaigns without relying on large donations from special interests. This fund better enables grassroots candidates to run on the interests of the average constituent that could be different than those of a deep-pocketed donor who may or may not be invested in the community and the district. The average constituent is interested in the health of the stream next door and the water that they drink, the dumping in the neighborhood park and truck exhaust, quality of life issues that make a big difference for people who live and work inside the city every day. The fish and the birds do not have a vote, but day in and day out, we hear that the average constituent cares about water quality, those safe parks and clean streets. By amplifying the contribution of the small donor constituent, the Fair Elections Fund elevates the quality of life issues that also lead to a cleaner, greener, healthier environment, and that is why we are supporting Council Bill 18-0229. Thank you.
Lois Hibble. I pronounced that correct.
Nobody ever has.
Hello, good evening, Council, Sponsor Burnett and Chairman Costello and the rest of the committee. I am Lois Hebel, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Baltimore City, and I'm a Baltimore City resident. As a member of an organization whose mission is defending democracy and empowering voters, I thank the councilman and his co-sponsors and the committee for the opportunity to support the charter amendment for the Fair Elections Fund. We urge the committee to vote in favor of the charter amendment to establish the Fair Elections Fund. We believe that this fund can be part of a process that increases participation among voters because they could see that more candidates without deep pockets would be able to compete. It would allow candidates to spend more time with constituents and less time courting big donors. Voters who choose to make small donations would feel that it makes more of a difference. This spring, we registered over 1,022 high school and community college students to vote under the leadership of Argentine Craig over here, who was the chairman of the project. But in the process, we did run into students who were reluctant to register and participate in the political process because they felt that their vote would not make any difference. We feel that the Fair Elections Fund can be part of the process to reduce the cynicism and encourage participation. And the League of Women Voters supports methods of financing political campaigns that enhance political equality for all citizens, ensure maximum participation by citizens in the political process, and protect representative democracy from being distorted by big spending in election campaigns, and enable candidates to compete equitably for public office, to ensure candidates have sufficient funds to communicate their messages to the public, and to combat corruption and undue influence in government. So we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Dukakis, represent Maryland. I hope I said that correctly.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Christy Dukakis. Thank you to Chairman Costello and members of the committee, and thank you to Councilman Burnett for introducing this bill, and thank you to all the co-sponsors. Represent Maryland is a all-volunteer, nonpartisan, pro-democracy group. It was started in 2015, and we have the support of about 3,000 Baltimore residents and voters who agree with our pro-democracy solutions, the number one of which is public election funds. When I started Represent Maryland, it was because I felt that big money groups and ultra-wealthy individuals and families had too much influence in politics all across the board. And as I researched, I started to understand historically why that was. American politics has never offered a candidate a winnable solution that didn't include and almost always require accepting big money donations from special interest groups and private corporations. And our public policy has been swayed in their favor because of it at the local, state, and federal levels. Now, more than ever, I believe big money interests have exponentially too much influence on legislation. But I've been surprised, as I've been doing this work, I've been surprised to learn that a lot of elected lawmakers, including some of the council members, are also unhappy with this arrangement between big money and elections. They feel boxed in by what they can and cannot do as a lawmaker because of it. Big money isn't just about who gets elected, it's about what laws are and aren't getting passed. And I want to really quickly address the finance department. There was a concern that this would cost money. Of course it will, but I believe that publicly funded candidates are going to be able to pass more efficient legislation in the long run, which is going to reduce the cost of government. Public election funds offer candidates a winnable alternative to the status quo, one that puts regular Americans at the center of their campaigns. And by passing this charter amendment, Baltimore has an opportunity to protect representative democracy for the future, for future generations, and to be a leader in the eyes of the rest of the nation. So please vote in favor of Bill 18-0229, which will set Baltimore on a path that will transform the city and the nation for the better. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony. Was there anyone else who had wanted to testify? Didn't sign up? Okay, colleagues, any discussion? Any remaining questions? We're going to wait for
The Lieutenant Governor.
joined by Jermaine Jones. Colleagues, is there a motion to move? My understanding is there's an amendment. Two amendments. Councilman Block.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as a co-sponsor of the bill and also a member of the committee, I would like to introduce amendments on behalf of Councilman Burnett, who's the lead sponsor of the bill. Those amendments are on your desks, and essentially they provide the legal sufficiency as mentioned by the law department and also speak to the implementation of the bill.
Councilman Bullock, I'm going to ask that normally I wouldn't, but just because of the importance of it and it's a charter amendment, if you would please read the two amendments.
Absolutely.
Or we'll do the first amendment and then.
Absolutely. So amendment number 1, on page 1 in line 6 after ordinance, insert authorizing the mayor and city council to provide for the oversight, governance, and administration of the Fair Election Fund by ordinance. And then on page 3 after line 27, insert E, implementation. By ordinance, the mayor and city council shall provide for the oversight, governance, and administration of the Fair Election Fund, including 1, qualifications of candidates eligible for funding from the fund, 2, methods and criteria for allocating available funds along eligible programs or candidates, and 3, the establishment of any other legislative or administrative rules, regulations, or standards consistent with this section governing the fund, its operations and programs, services, and candidates funded by it.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilman Bullock. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Scott. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. That motion is approved. Amendment number 2, Councilman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So amendment number 2. On page 2 in line 14, strike 2 and substitute 3. And on the same page in line 15, strike President of the City Council and substitute Mayor. And in line 17 and 18, strike President of the City Council and substitute Mayor. And on line 19, strike 2, additional and substitute 5. And on line 20, strike and strike 21 in its entirety. And on page 3 in line 2, strike vote and substitute the president.
Just give me one sec.
Can I ask that you tell us what that?
So, yeah, so on page
No, but
2.
I mean.
Okay, so the idea is that basically switching the number of appointees that are going to be put forth by the council president and by the mayor's office from, I believe, sorry, I'm going to pull it up. Right now it says 2 members appointed by the mayor. That would add 4 more, so it would be 6. And the total, where it says line 5, would be striking 4, and those would go 3 for members representing organizations focused on government reform.
So how many would be there?
So essentially, the mayor would have 6 appointees, the council president would have 5 appointees, or the council would have 5 appointees via the council president.
So it's 11.
11 total.
That hasn't changed.
No, the number hasn't changed.
But the who appoints
Yes.
changed?
Yes.
So from 2 appointed by the mayor to 6 appointed by the mayor,
Mm-hmm.
and from
3.
I don't know how many were appointed by
So
the.
let me read through what the new language would be. 1, 2 members appointed by the mayor. 2, 2 members representing organizations focused on government reform appointed by the mayor. Number 3, 1 member representing an organization advocating for the interests of city business owners appointed by the president of the city council. Number 4, 2 additional members appointed by the mayor. And number 5, 4 members appointed by majority vote of the city council. Is that correct?
It's being struck. Number 5.
Number
4
fi-
members appointed by the majority of the council.
So, all right, so in other words.
And it would be 5.
Oh, it would be 5.
So 4. So where it says line 4, it would read 5 additional members appointed by the president of the city council, and we would be striking line 5.
5 additional 5.
Line 5. So here, this
Here,
gets
it's
struck. Gone.
So what happened here? We got, everybody's appointed by somebody. So we have 6 people appointed by the mayor. Do they include these
Yes.
next members?
The criteria doesn't change of where, with the,
Is it 6 plus 2 plus 1, or is it 6?
it'd be
Including-
2 plus 3 plus 1 for the mayor, if you're starting from the top.
All right.
So
All
that,
right.
so line
it's
one,
the amended is 6 members appointed by the mayor, 2 members representing organizations.
Can we pause for a second? Councilman Burnett, can you read the revised language if this is amended?
Yep.
Please.
All right, so it'll read, the Baltimore City Fair Election Fund Commission consists of 11 members, including 2 members appointed by the mayor.
So that stays.
Yep. 3 members representing organizations focused on government reform appointed by the mayor. So you're striking president of the city council.
Okay, so now we're at 5.
Yep. 1 member representing an organization advocating for the interest of city business owners appointed by the mayor.
The mayor. So that's the 6.
Yep.
Oh, okay, I thought it was 6 plus 2 plus 3 plus, yeah, okay. So then what happens? So we got 6 people.
Yep, I'll keep going. It's all right. So then it would read 5 additional members appointed by the president of the city council. And you'd be striking the word and you'd be striking line 5, which is 4 members appointed by the majority of the city council.
So they were always appointed by somebody.
Yep.
Now they're appointed. All right, so 6 of them are appointed by the mayor, 5 of them are appointed by the president.
Correct.
So we still need a member representing an organization advocating for the mayor's interests. So are there any specific, okay, so, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to absorb this. 2 members appointed by the mayor, and that's like without qualification, just like mayor.
Well, we would hope that the
Well, what-
people, we could work with the administration to
Okay.
ensure that these are good people, not random people.
Well, no, I don't expect bad people. I'm just trying to figure out whether we're making sure there are representatives
They,
from all,
they all have to be confirmed by the council.
That doesn't change.
well, yeah. Oh, does it say that someplace?
Yes, on line 28.
Right.
Okay, so 2 by the mayor, then 3 by the mayor, but these have to represent organizations focused on good government.
Correct.
They're not appointed by the city, I got you. Then 1 by the mayor that represents an organization advocating for the interests of city business owners. Okay. And then there's 5 that the president of the city council appoints, and there's no conditions?
Correct.
Okay, what, are we missing anything? Have we left a group out or anything? As a source of nominees? I haven't
someone
thought
else?
about this.
Yeah.
No, I don't. Women, no.
Well, they have to be, so I mean, they have to be a resident in the city of Baltimore.
Oh,
They
yeah,
can't be a
that's all
candidate. They
done.
can't be a lobbyist.
We
Yeah.
got that.
Yeah.
So I think these other conditions also help a lot, and
Yep.
they're already in text. Thank you for taking the time to go through that.
There's a motion by Bullock, a second by Scott. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. This motion is adopted. Is there a motion to move the bill as amended? Motion by Scott, second by Bullock. Costello, yes. Clark?
Yes.
Bullock? Yes. Pinkett?
Yes.
Reisinger? Yes. Scott? Stokes? Yes. This bill moves to second reader on June 25th. We're now in recess.